offensive line this cycle. Just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts on maybe one, why, and two, kind of what stuck out about some of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the way we've tried to construct our team, it's definitely supply and demand. And, you look at the last 2 years, we graduated basically or lost 4 starters a year ago. This year, the potential of losing 4 more starters or four guys that played significant time. And so O-line was a major priority. The goal is to have at least 17 on scholarship if at all possible. And depth has been an issue. So what we've tried to do now is fill that depth issue with the high school kids that you see, when we sign 8 high school offensive linemen, and then we've used the transfer portal to be able to plug and play some guys that will allow these guys the necessary time to develop, until we can get them up to speed. And most of these linemen, as you can see, have great length, the size potential to be what we're looking for. And if you want to win in the Big Ten, you've got to have your O-line and D-line set. And we were able to address the D-line a year ago. And this year there's been a premium and put a point of emphasis on creating the depth and developing the offensive line to be able to compete and win.
We'll go to Wes Brown.
Hey, Coach, on the topic of Braden Lee, obviously a late addition to the class there. I know his process was a little different. I guess for this year, what was it like down the stretch, trying to get him in the fold? And then what does that, commitment mean impact-wise in terms of local recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to keep a talented player like Braden home, it's always helpful. His recruiting process was a very normal process to what we see here. Everybody in the country comes to the DMV, and I think it's a testament to the type of high school football players we have in this area, and to the high school coaches and the way they develop their players. And obviously Braden was a guy that was recruited by everybody. When you have the length that he has, as well as the short area quickness, the long speed, to be able to play out on that island and in this league, we've been able to, the last few years, have a few corners drafted, and I think we'll have 2 of them drafted this year. And so Braden's one of those guys that we thought has the ability to come in and help us early. The way his process went, he committed to South Carolina, I guess, earlier in the process. And what we always do is, we call and we congratulate them on their commitments, but we also find out if they would like for us to continue to recruit or if they're pretty rock solid. And, from the time he committed, he always said, hey, I'm willing to keep some options open. And we were respectful of his decision, but we continue to show him why Maryland could help him reach the goals that he has for himself. And today he made the decision that he trusted the process that we put in place for him.
We'll go to Varun. Hey, Coach, how are you?
What's up, Varun? How are you?
Doing well. Wanted to ask, with Braden Lee coming over from South Carolina, there's obviously a bit of a history between the two programs. What does this just add to the supposed rivalry between South Carolina and Maryland?
It's hard to have a rival when we don't play football. Obviously, they recruit up here like everybody else. And, in the perfect world, I'd love to, as I always say, put a wall around the DMV and keep all these teams out. But, when you've got talented players in your backyard, and as we found, there's enough good players right here at home, and we'll always start here first. But again, Braden saw the value in staying home and being able to help us continue the build and the process that we've started here. And, anytime you're able to get a guy like him, and obviously with the SEC ties and the Big Ten and us constantly competing, I mean, it was a good win for us, but I wouldn't say that there's a rival just yet until somebody schedules a game, and, I'd be all for that.
And then I wanted to ask, with the offensive lineman, you said that it usually takes them, 1 to 2 years to get that physical maturity to get onto the field. Is there anyone in this class that you think could maybe start from day one?
I mean, the guys that come in with the size, I mean, you look in guys like Therese Davis and Ryan Howerton and those guys have the physical size to be able to do it, whereas some of the guys we signed are guys that we plan on growing over the next couple of years. When you're in the 280-pound mold coming to the Big Ten, the goal is to get them over to 300 and develop size and strength and mass, because this is a big man's league. And we're one of the few teams that has skill, that or continues to recruit the skill necessary for this league. But it all starts and ends with developing up front on the O-line and D-line. And we saw us take major steps on the D-line this year through recruiting and through the portal. And we focused and put a premium on offensive line this year.
And then I wanted to ask with, obviously there's public recruiting ranking sites, but who's someone that's maybe you feel might be further down those lists that you think could have a big impact for this team?
You know what? I haven't studied it enough to know who's down or who's up because, when I put on the tape, we don't know how many stars they have. We don't necessarily follow it like that. But there are a ton of guys that, as I said before, most of these guys that we signed, we have had them in camp. We've had our hands on them in terms of being able to evaluate the skill and the characteristics we're looking for. And so, if they pass our evaluation and we have them here in camp and we feel as though they're good enough to help us take the next step as a program, we sign them. And so, I would venture to say that a lot of these guys that we've signed, I don't know how much notoriety they have or how well they're liked by the people outside our program, but I can tell you we didn't sign one guy that we didn't like or one guy that we didn't think would have the ability to help us either now or down the road here soon.
Any specific names that stand out as day one contributors?
Skill guys always, as you look and see the skill guys that are in our system, running backs, receivers, DBs, those guys, the further away from the ball they play, typically they're able to get on the field a little quicker because they don't have to deal with the physicality. And obviously with graduating 2 corners again, I would say, it's going to be competition there at the cornerback position, up front on the D-line. And you look at some of the guys that we've signed, outside linebackers. We lost some linebackers this year as well. And I think the further away from the ball that the players are that we've recruited, the better chance they have of getting on the field. Though there's always 1 or 2 guys up front that's shown the ability this year. Guys like Dylan Fontes and Levon Johnson contributed greatly on the D-line. And I think you'll see some of the younger O-linemen that come in with the necessary size. As the season goes along, we try to develop them. We try to play them enough to where if we need them, I can see some of those guys filling out our 2 deep.
We'll go to Emmett.
I wanted to circle back on
Hey,
what you
Emmett, how
said
are you?
about- I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
You're busy. I wanted to circle back on what you said about possible flips and the like. From guys that have been on board with Maryland for a long time, how much work has to go into keeping them on board, over the course of their recruiting process and getting to the finish line?
Yeah, it's a job that requires a lot of time. When you worry about the guys that once they commit, now you have the target on your back. Everybody has different approaches to recruiting, but most people, when they know who to attack, they try to find any weakness and every weakness they can to create the angst in the decision. And then you also have to recruit your current team because these guys are being talked to and they're being poached and portaled. And so, the work of maintaining your current roster as much as you can, while also babysitting guys that are committed, that continue to be recruited like we do other people. So, not crying over the amount of work that it takes, but I can tell you it takes a lot of manpower, a lot of hours to continue to recruit the guys once they are on board, because now all the targets are pointing at you.
And a follow-up, are there any assistants on your staff that maybe stood out to you as, really, really good recruiters this cycle that made a big impact?
Well, the way recruiting works nowadays, it used to be a deal where it was, one guy recruited all his area and traveled all over, but there's been so many, it takes a village in recruiting now because you're just dealing with the amount of people. And I would say that for the most part, each member of our staff, and the goal is, I tell every coach should be able to go get one great player that most people don't think we can get. And if the 10 full-times and myself were able to go land one great one that we typically, we would have to work hard to get, that's more than typically 1/3 of your class in the old days when you signed 25. And I can tell you that each coach in our program has contributed to the signing of this class. And, it'd be tough to point out one guy that does it. The recruiting office with Mercy and those guys and Brian Griffin and, and Marcus Thomas. I mean, they do a ton of the work. So there's a lot of places to spread the wealth around in terms of helping and putting this class together.
We'll go to Andrew.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Andrew, what's up, man?
Doing all right. I got a bit of a different question. About half your class is enrolling early for the spring semester. I was just wondering, what's that? Is that point of emphasis during early conversations with these guys if they're able to get on campus early? And then just how important do you feel that is for the guys to get acclimated a semester beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, this is the trend. I mean, just like portaling, guys going in the portal and losing a percentage of your roster every year becomes a trend. Graduating early, I think the players see the value of being able to get in and get a spring ball under their belt, which then allows them to have the opportunity to compete, to play early. But I also think there's an academic component which allows you to come in without the pressure of the academic side and playing a season. And so some of these guys are able, and we've seen when they come in early, they get off to a fast start and good start academically where, you know, you see guys graduating with their degrees, undergraduate degrees in 3.5 years, and then able to work on a master's. And we're huge on taking full advantage of all these opportunities and that, you know, graduating early allows you to. And to leave here with 2 degrees is a big deal in the course of a 4-year, 5-year window. And so I just think that's the nature of the beast. With the guys wanting to get in earlier to allow them to compete. But also I think the academic component is really attractive to some of the players.
We'll take 2 more. We'll go back to Ahmed.
Hey, Coach. Wanted to ask about Judah Jenkins. It sounded like, you know, he was a guy that kind of materialized late. And it's I was talking to Coach Stefanelli earlier, and he mentioned, you know, he was someone that he was really advocating for. Judah, you know, he wanted to be here, but just kind of wanted to hear from your perspective, you know, how you felt like maybe all that kind of came together, you know, at a position of need.
Yeah, you know, Judah's one of those guys, man, that he is just a football player. And I've had a chance to see him develop, you know, being local, and seeing his development from 9th grade on. You know, people have a lot of respect for Andy Stefanelli and that good council staff. They do a tremendous job developing players, but, you know, I know he also trains here locally, and he was a guy that wanted to be a Terp. And, you know, I know when he committed to Indiana, you know, we were kind of slow early on him, but when you watch the senior year and to see him continue to develop and get better, I mean, it's hard to turn down good football players, and he's one of those guys that has a skill set to be a corner, a star, you know, a slot nickel corner for us. I love his competitiveness, and just when you talk to Andy and the staff over there, I mean, he was kind of the glue of that team, and so to have an opportunity, and the way recruiting works now, it's not a science to it, but we've known about him, we knew a lot about him. We had an opportunity. It's a lot like the NFL draft where you got best available on the board, and he was definitely one of the best available and a guy that we felt really strongly about. So really glad that this materialized for us because we got ourselves a really good football player on the defensive side of the ball.
We'll wrap up with Wes.
Yeah, Coach, you kind of talk about how important the bowl practices are for some of these early enrollees, being able to do that. But I know Lloyd Irvin was a guy who didn't even play football this year, but was able to, you know, being so local, come over and do meetings and watch practices and all that kind of stuff this fall. I know you've got some guys who aren't able to enroll early, but want to do that for the spring. How important is being able to attend those meetings and be a part of the program, even though you even can't necessarily practice? How important is that for their growth, even if it's not on the field?
Yeah, you know, I've sold the location of Maryland for years and years and years, and that's another example of what the location affords us to do, because, you know, to have local players that maybe aren't able to graduate early because of their school or playing other sports in which we are all for, to have the ability to drive over, and if you're not participating in spring ball, and you know we're a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday team, so we always have meetings in between for spring practice, gives these players an opportunity to maybe get a jump start, even though they can't practice, but to sit in the meetings, to hear the installs, to stand back behind on practice and watch and see the drill work and the installation that goes on in the field is is you can't put a value for that, allowing some of these younger players that are in the area that can't graduate early. It still gives them a chance to develop within our system without necessarily practicing, which then allows when they show up here in June, it's not really the first time they've gone through one of our installs for offense, defense, or special teams. And we've seen over the years a ton of players take advantage of that, and it's benefited them being able to get on the field early.
All right. Thanks, Coach.